Okay, so I use these large washers to press the bearings on. This gave me a nice plate to put pressure on both the inner and outer race. So that's what I used. Worked great. I have a whole bunch of them, so for the other side, the finished side, I just stacked them all together and took a rubber mallet and gently tapped the bearing down into the seat. But these are 1 3/4 width on the outside, and the inside is 7/16, and the thickness is 1/8, so they're nice and heavy duty. They wouldn't warp when you're putting pressure on them or anything. So these worked out really well. And I'm sure you can pick some of these up at your hardware store. I happen to have them lying around, so worked for me. This is the puller I used. It's quite large. 2-jawed puller with a really long stem on it. Also adjustable here for additional length or less length, depending on what you need. There's 2 different ends on it. These are more for pulling. These are more for putting your bearings back on. They're flat, so these actually will put pressure on both your inner and outer races, at least on this side's bearing. But I didn't want to take a chance, so I used the washers to help with that. But I used this to pull the bearings off as well. Worked great. And then it's just got a hex head on it for a wrench. It'd be nice if they had a handle, but worked fine. And it's pretty old. It's a Miller Detroit L4534. Made in good old USA, which is nice. But yeah, I don't know if you can still get one of these, but you could probably find one used. But because of the length of it, it's perfect for this, working with the shaft. You have to picture this with the shaft out of the unit. Obviously, I didn't do it with the unit on there, but so first I pulled the bearing on like so. I had this on the shaft right here, and I slid my bearing on. Say the washer's bearing. Slid my bearing on, and put the washer over it, and then I took the 2-jawed puller, and as I said, because it's long enough, I was able to just pull it right on, and it was great. It pulled on with hand torquing. I was able to turn this bolt by hand and pull the bearing on, because I froze it overnight. Make sure you have your spring washer seated in here, if you have one of these with a spring washer, before you go putting your bearing in there. And the legs on the spring washer go out towards the outer race of the bearing. They don't go in. At least that's how the manual shows it. I've seen people put them in the other way, but I put it in the way that the instruction manual shows. So yeah, make sure that's in the cup before you put your bearing on. And always do the flange side first. If you put your bearing on over here first, you're gonna be messed up. So the spring goes in the cup before you do any of this, so you're all set to go. And so your bearing goes on the shaft, and that seats all the way up against the shaft's got a larger center, and so there's a shoulder there for it to press up against. So you do that, and then take your washer off, and this pulls on the washer just perfectly. It's hard to hold, but you can see like that, and it just slides right on. Probably 3-jawed puller would be nicer, but it sat flat and everything. It didn't flex. So, and then your flange collar, which you have to pull that off when you're changing the bearings. And some of these saws, not this particular model, but some of them have a little pin that goes all the way through to, I guess, keep that from falling off. But it's on there so tightly it would never come off. But the later models, they thought they better put a pin in, so they did. Mine doesn't have the pin, but anyways, if yours does, take that pin out before you go trying to pull this off. So anyways, I just repeated the process with the flange. Again, slid the flange over the shaft, put my washer on to protect it. Didn't want to damage it, so I still used the washer. And then took the 2 jaws and pulled it on. And of course your stem here, right here, you can see the pin on the end that goes right up against the end of the shaft when you're doing it, and your 2 jaws obviously go over whatever you're pulling on there. So you'll have to make a. I didn't actually make an indent on the end. I just when I pulled the bearings, the puller actually made its own indent, so it didn't slip off there. It's got a sharp enough point where it just drove a little divot in there for it to catch. But you may want to take your shaft and pre-drill a couple little divots on each end. So you'd need one on this end too for when you're pulling this stuff off. So anyways, you get all this stuff on that side, and you just slide your whole assembly right into here. And again, as I said, those bearings will slide right in. That didn't take any force at all. I was able to slide the whole shaft with the bearing on it in there. Then you got to get this on something that'll take an impact. I put mine on a block. I laid this down like this and put it on a block of wood, so that because this bearing I had to bang on. There's no way to get the puller on to pull from this side with the carriage in the way. So so that I did have to bang on. So what I did there was I slid my bearing on, stacked. I kept stacking washers as it got farther and farther down. And then it just popped right in. And this has a snap ring on it to hold the bearing in place. You can see the 2 ends of the snap ring there, and that just sits in a groove. So that goes on after. So your bearing's seated correctly when you get the inner race just past that seat groove. You can just pop your snap ring on. So yeah, and again, the washer worked perfectly because it put pressure on the inner and outer race at the same time, and seated that just perfect in there. And it was a little snug in here, but once it got down to here, it popped right in. So, and that's it. But make sure your shaft's supported on the other end when you're pounding on this end, because otherwise you will damage your other bearing that you just put in. Well, you actually probably wouldn't damage it, because as I said, it slides in and out, but what will happen is you'll just push the shaft right out with the bearing, so, and it wouldn't be good. It would still be exerting force on the outer race if it went out crooked or whatever. So, and that's it. And then this has a little. The reason these holes are here is it has a little flange, like a scutcheon or whatever you want to call it. And it goes on there and partially covers the bearing, I guess, to hold the outer race in. So that's that. Make sure you oil the shaft too. Just a little light oiling before you slide the bearings on. Put it in the freezer overnight. Make sure it's nice and cold, and get those bearings on as fast as you can. Believe me, it makes all the difference. And these you don't need to heat up, because they're already sized for that. I mean, you can if you want, and then your bearings really will just slide. They'll flop in there, but there's no need to heat the carriage up, the cups. All you really need to do is freeze your shaft to shrink that metal down, and then your bearings will slide right on. So, but that's it. It's pretty simple. You can do it all with a puller, as long as you've got one that's long enough. Let's see if I could kind of do a visual. But yeah, you just there, yep. Out of proportion, but yeah, you just drag and just pull your stuff right on there. And that's great for this side. This is the only side you have to bang on, but as long as you do it right, it's fine. But yeah, do not be careful about how you bang on the other side. Make sure this end is supported, and make sure this is the bottom part is sitting on something too. You don't want You don't want all the weight of this sitting on this either. It's a lot of weight on the bearing. So, yeah, you just kind of tilt it down and lean it on something like that when you're banging on this. Or not on this, but on the washers and bearing. So that's about it. As I said, if I'd been thinking, I probably would have done this while I was doing it, but it would have been kind of hard. So yep, get good bearings. Japan, German, or US, if you can find them. And just be careful about how you install them, so you don't damage the cage, the bearing cage. And that's it. And you'll have another Arbor setup ready to go for another 50 years, hopefully. I'll be happy if I get 25 out of these. This saw's going to get a lot of use